The desert night was cold, the wind biting hard against the canvas of Eli's tent. A shadow appeared at the flap. When he pulled it open, an Apache woman stood before him, her eyes fierce but desperate. "Shelter," she whispered. But what she did once inside would leave Eli shaken in ways he never imagined. The lantern inside the tent flickered weakly, casting long shadows on the worn canvas walls. Eli Harper had spent too many nights alone on the frontier, his rifle his only company, his horse tied close. He was used to silence, to the emptiness of the land. But this night was different. The flap of the tent stirred, and there she was. Her hair hung damp from the evening dew, her clothes torn from travel, her chest rising with the effort of breath. She didn't ask for food, didn't ask for water, only for shelter, her voice steady but edged with exhaustion. Eli hesitated, his hand brushing the butt of his revolver. Out here, strangers rarely knocked without reason. "Why here?" he asked, his voice low. Her dark eyes held his, unblinking. "Because you opened the door." There was no time to argue. The wind howled harder, rattling the canvas, carrying with it the sound of coyotes in the distance. Against his better judgment, Eli stepped aside, letting her enter. She moved with quiet assurance, her gaze sweeping the inside of the tent, noting every detail. The rifle propped in the corner, the saddle by the bedroll, the tin cup of coffee still steaming faintly. She sat by the lantern, her posture calm, though her shoulders carried the weight of more than the storm outside. Eli poured her water from his canteen, sliding it across. She took it, but her eyes never left his face. "You're alone," she said. Not as a question, but a statement. He shrugged. "Been that way a while." She studied him for a moment, then whispered, "That makes you dangerous." The words unsettled him more than any weapon could. He frowned. "And you? You ask for shelter from a stranger and call him dangerous?" Her lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "Strangers are always dangerous, but sometimes danger is safer than being hunted." Eli's chest tightened. Hunted. That word shifted the air in the tent, turned the silence into a waiting storm. She hadn't come here by chance, and as the coyotes howled again outside, he realized he had just let something far more dangerous than the night into his tent. The night pressed heavy around the tent, every sound sharpened by silence. Eli sat across from the Apache woman, the lantern glow carving shadows across her face. She hadn't offered a name, and he hadn't asked. Out here, names were often as dangerous as bullets. She drank from his canteen, every movement deliberate, as if measuring whether to trust him or whether to stay at all. Eli shifted uncomfortably, his rifle close at hand. "If you're running from the cold, you picked the wrong tent. There are warmer fires south of here." Her eyes flicked to his hand on the rifle. "Those fires belong to men who would sell me back to the ones chasing me." That answer landed heavy in his gut. He leaned forward. "So you are hunted." She said nothing, only set the canteen aside and drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders. But the silence itself was answer enough. Eli rubbed his jaw, torn between sending her away and locking the tent flap. "Men don't cross this land for nothing." "Who are they?" Finally, her voice cut through the air, quiet but sharp. "A trading party. They brought rifles, whiskey, promises. My village refused them. They took what they wanted anyway. When I fought back, they swore they'd make an example of me." Eli's chest tightened. He'd seen men like that, drifters with gold in their pockets and no law on their backs, men who preyed on weakness like coyotes on lambs. He had no love for them, but stepping between such men and their quarry was a quick way to get yourself buried. "And you thought my tent was safer?" he asked, a bitter edge to his tone. Her gaze didn't waver. "You're not one of them," he snorted. "How do you know?" "Because you let me in." The words lingered, simple and undeniable. Eli felt them cut deeper than he liked. He'd spent years alone, convincing himself he was finished with other people's troubles. But something in her voice, some unshaken certainty, reminded him of the man he'd once been, before solitude became his shield. The coyotes outside howled louder, closer now. The horses tied near the camp stamped nervously, ears pricked to the darkness. Eli rose, grabbing his rifle, and slipped to the tent's flap. The night beyond was vast, the moon silvering the desert floor. For a moment, all seemed still. Then he saw it, a glint on the ridge, faint but unmistakable. Metal catching moonlight, a rifle barrel. He ducked back into the tent, his voice low but urgent. "They've found you." Her body stiffened, but her face stayed calm. "I told you they would." "Then why bring them to my camp?" Because you were already part of it the moment you opened the flap. Eli cursed under his breath, loading fresh rounds into the chamber. He glanced at her, at the fire in her eyes, even as danger pressed closer. She hadn't come just for shelter. She had come because she believed he wouldn't turn her away. Outside, a voice called from the ridge, rough and mocking. "Send her out, Cowboy, and we'll let you live. Keep her, and you'll share her fate." Eli felt the weight of the choice crush him. He'd lived years keeping his head low, staying out of trouble, letting other men fight their wars. But the way she looked at him now, silent but steady, told him she already knew what he would do. He chambered the round with a sharp click, his voice steady as he answered through the canvas. "You picked the wrong tent." The silence outside cracked with laughter, cold, merciless. Then boots scraped stone, rifles clattered, and the night erupted with gunfire. Bullets tore through canvas, splintering poles, shattering the lantern in a burst of sparks. Darkness swallowed the tent. Eli shoved the woman down, returning fire through the flap. His rifle roared, the shot echoing across the desert. A scream followed, then the heavy thud of a body hitting sand. The woman crawled beside him, her knife flashing in the dark. "They won't stop," she hissed. "Not until one of us is gone." Eli's pulse hammered, but his hands were steady. For the first time in years, the loneliness in his chest was gone, replaced by something sharper: responsibility, fury, and maybe, beneath it all, a reason to fight. Outside, the attackers regrouped, their shadows flickering in the moonlight. The battle had only just begun. Gunfire split the night, each shot echoing off the canyon walls like thunder. The tent shuddered as bullets punched through the canvas, tearing holes that bled moonlight. Eli dragged the Apache woman to the ground, his body shielding hers as dust rained from the impact. "Stay low," he barked, rolling to his rifle. Outside, voices jeered, cruel and mocking. "Cowboy, you got no business in this. Step aside, and we'll let you crawl away." Eli fired through the flap, the muzzle flash lighting his hardened face. A cry answered his shot, one man falling. "If you wanted an easy kill," Eli growled, "you should have stayed home." The woman crouched beside him, knife in hand, eyes fierce. "They'll push harder now. You've spilled blood. They'll want yours too." Eli reloaded, jaw tight. "Then they can come take it." A shadow swept past the tent's torn wall. Eli grabbed her wrist, pulling her aside just as a blade ripped through the canvas where her head had been. He swung his rifle butt hard, cracking it against the intruder's skull. The man crumpled without a sound. No time to breathe. More boots thundered outside, circling. A lantern flared in the distance, casting their silhouettes against the canvas. They were trying to burn him out. "They'll torch the tent," Eli hissed. The woman's eyes narrowed. "Then we move before the fire does." He slashed the back seam of the tent with his knife, cutting a narrow exit. "Go!" They burst into the night air, the desert cold and sharp. Moonlight spilled silver across the sand, painting every shadow as an enemy. Shots cracked behind them, sparks flashing as bullets struck stone. Eli dropped to a knee, rifle steady, and fired back. Another rider fell, blood staining the ground. The woman darted toward the horses, her movements quick and sure despite the chaos. Two attackers lunged from the shadows, but she moved like lightning, ducking low, slashing one across the thigh, then driving her blade into the other's shoulder. Both men fell writhing, their cries drowned by the roar of Eli's rifle. She yanked the reins of Eli's horse, shoving the animal toward him. "Ride!" Eli shook his head, firing again. "Not without you." More shadows closed in. 6, maybe 7 men left, rifles raised, circling like wolves. Their leader, a thick-set man with a scar running from ear to jaw, stepped forward. His voice carried across the clearing. "You made your choice, Cowboy. You'll die for her tonight." Eli spat in the dirt. "You'll have to earn it." The scarred man laughed, raising his pistol. "So be it." The firefight erupted again, lead ripping through the night. Eli and the woman fought back to back, her knife flashing, his rifle booming with deadly precision. Each shot echoed like defiance, each swing of her blade a vow not to fall quietly. But they were outnumbered. A bullet grazed Eli's shoulder, hot pain searing through flesh. He staggered but steadied, firing back with teeth clenched. She caught him, shoving him behind cover. "You bleed. You slow. Let me strike." He looked at her, this woman who had asked only for shelter, but now fought as though she had lived 100 battles. "You'll get yourself killed." Her eyes burned. Better beside you than in their hands. The words struck him harder than the bullet had. He nodded once, then rose with her. Together they surged forward, breaking the circle. Eli's rifle cracked twice more, dropping men who'd thought him spent. She lunged, driving her knife under the scarred man's ribs. His roar split the air, echoing off the canyon as he crumpled into the dirt, eyes wide with disbelief. The last of his men faltered, hesitated, then fled into the darkness, their hoofbeats fading into the desert. Silence followed, heavy, broken only by Eli's ragged breathing and the woman's trembling hands as she wiped blood from her blade. The firelight from the burning tent cast their faces in red, the night alive with smoke and ash. Eli staggered, clutching his bleeding shoulder. She caught his arm, steadying him. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice raw. He met her gaze, chest heaving. "No, we saved each other." The fire crackled louder, consuming what little shelter he had left. Their horses stamped nervously, sensing the ruin left behind. The desert stretched endless beyond them, a road that promised no safety, only more men, more guns, more pursuit. But Eli knew one thing now. He wasn't alone anymore, and that, more than his rifle or her knife, was the sharpest weapon they carried. The desert dawn broke harsh, its light washing the land in shades of red and gold. Eli rode stiff in the saddle, his shirt torn where the bullet had grazed his shoulder. Each step of the horse jarred the wound, but he gritted his teeth and pressed on. Behind him, the smoke of his burned camp still rose, curling into the sky like a signal for every bounty hunter within 50 miles. The woman rode beside him, her dark hair whipping in the wind. She hadn't spoken since they'd fled, her eyes locked on the horizon. When she finally broke the silence, her words were steady. "They'll follow. Killing their leader won't stop them. It will only make them angrier." Eli glanced at her, his jaw tight. "Then maybe you start telling me why. What's worth enough blood to send men through a storm after you?" She looked down at the reins in her hands, her silence weighing heavy. "Finally," she whispered, "because I carry something they fear, something they can't allow to reach the wrong hands." Eli's frown deepened. "What?" Her hand slipped into her shawl, pulling free a leather pouch bound tight with cord. She held it close, almost reverently. "My father wrote this before he died. Names, trades, deals made in shadows. Proof of men who sell weapons and whiskey to destroy villages like mine." Eli's chest tightened. "A ledger," she nodded. "If it reaches the right people, those men lose everything. Land, power, gold, that's why they want me dead. Not just for what I am, but for what I carry." Eli cursed under his breath. He knew what it meant. This wasn't a fight that would burn out with one dead outlaw. This was a war of money and pride, the kind that bled across borders and left graves in its wake. "You should have burned it," he muttered. Her gaze snapped to him, fierce. "And let them go on destroying lives without consequence? My father died to protect this. If I bury it, I bury him too." He looked at her for a long moment. The fire in her eyes left no room for doubt. She wasn't running for her life. She was running for something greater. And somehow, by opening that tent flap, he had tied himself to her cause. By midday, the sun scorched overhead, heat shimmering across the barren land. They stopped near a cluster of rocks, letting the horses drink from a shallow pool left by the storm. Eli winced as he peeled back his shirt, inspecting the wound. Blood had clotted, but the skin was raw and angry. The woman tore a strip of cloth from her own shawl, kneeling beside him. "Hold still." He grumbled but obeyed as she pressed the cloth to his shoulder. The sting made him curse aloud. She smirked faintly. "A man who takes a bullet should learn not to whine like a child." "Easy for you to say," he muttered. "You're not the one leaking blood." Her smirk faded, replaced by something softer. "I've bled enough. Different wounds. But worse than this." For the first time, Eli saw more than fire in her eyes. He saw sorrow, loss, etched deep beneath her strength. "You never told me your name," he said quietly. She hesitated, then whispered, "Nayeli." He repeated it once, as if anchoring it to memory. "Nayeli, why trust me?" She tied the cloth tight, meeting his gaze. "Because when I asked for shelter, you didn't close the door. That's enough." Before he could answer, the horses snorted nervously, ears flicking. Eli's instincts flared. He grabbed his rifle, scanning the horizon. A faint dust trail curled in the distance. Riders. "Damn it," he growled. "They're still on us." Nayeli's jaw tightened. "They won't stop. Not until they hold this ledger." Eli mounted quickly, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. Then we keep moving, but sooner or later, we'll have to turn and face them. They rode hard, the desert blurring past, dust rising in choking clouds. The riders behind grew closer, their shouts faint but rising. Each mile tightened the noose. By nightfall, Eli and Nayeli slipped into a dry arroyo, the moon casting long shadows across the rock walls. They dismounted, pressing into the darkness, listening as hoofbeats thundered above. Voices echoed, searching, circling, never far. Eli gripped his rifle, his whisper sharp. "We can't outrun them forever. Tomorrow, we make a stand." Nayeli's hand rested on the pouch against her chest, her eyes unyielding. "Then tomorrow, they'll learn why my father died, and why I won't." Above them, a rider's whistle pierced the night, shrill, sharp, and close. Dust rained down from the cliff as hooves struck stone. The hunt was closing in. The arroyo twisted like a serpent under the pale moon, its walls looming high, the shadows thick. Eli pressed his back to the stone, listening as hoofbeats echoed above. Each strike rattled dust loose, sprinkling down over him and Nayeli where they crouched. "They're splitting," he whispered, some up top and some searching the floor. Nayeli's fingers tightened around her knife, the leather pouch still bound tight against her chest. "They know we're here." Eli scanned the rocks. They had nowhere to run, only the narrow passage ahead or the steep walls that hemmed them in. "Then we make them pay for every step." The first shadow appeared at the bend, lantern light throwing long shapes across the stone. Eli raised his rifle, firing before the man could shout. The shot echoed like thunder, the figure collapsing hard into the dust. The canyon erupted with noise, shouts, gunfire, the wild bray of frightened horses. Lanterns swung wildly above as men scrambled along the ridge, their bullets sparking against rock. "Move!" Eli growled, pulling Nayeli deeper into the arroyo. They ran low, shadows darting, the narrow path guiding them like a funnel. Shots rained down from above, one grazing the stone inches from Nayeli's head. She dove behind a boulder, panting hard, eyes blazing. "They'll box us in." Eli crouched beside her, teeth clenched. "Not if we break them first." He reloaded, then rose just high enough to fire at the ridge. One lantern shattered, plunging part of the canyon into darkness. He shifted quickly, squeezing off another shot that dropped a man mid-shout. The rest cursed, scrambling to reposition. Then came the whistle, shrill, commanding. From the bend behind them, more riders surged in, their hooves pounding the dry earth, pistols flashing in the moonlight. "Trapped," Nayeli's voice cut sharp through the chaos. "The rocks! Bring them down!" Eli's eyes snapped to the jagged ledge above, where storm rains had loosened stone. It was a gamble, but a desperate one. He steadied his rifle, exhaling slow, then fired. The shot struck true, splitting the edge. With a roar, boulders tumbled down, crashing into the riders. Horses screamed, men shouted, and dust swallowed the air. The avalanche bought them seconds. "No more! Go!" Eli barked, dragging Nayeli forward through the choking dust. They stumbled over fallen rock, through the cries of wounded men. Nayeli slashed at one who reached for her, her blade sinking deep before she tore free. Gunfire followed them still, flashes lighting the canyon walls. A bullet seared Eli's thigh, knocking him hard to the ground. He bit back a cry, dragging himself behind cover. Nayeli dropped beside him, eyes wide. "Eli? I'm fine," he lied, gritting his teeth as blood soaked his pants. "Keep moving." But she shook her head, defiant. "I won't leave you." The attackers regrouped fast, voices echoing closer. The whistle sounded again, sharp, relentless. Eli pressed his rifle into her hands. "Take it." Her eyes widened. "Nurse, take it," he barked. "I'll slow them down. You get that book out of here." Her hand trembled as she gripped the rifle. "If I run, you die. If I stay, we might both live." Eli stared at her, at the fire burning in her eyes, and he realized she wasn't bluffing. She had chosen her fight, and it wasn't one she'd walk away from. The first attacker rounded the boulder, pistol raised. Nayeli fired, the recoil nearly throwing her back. The man dropped, his pistol clattering into the dust. She turned to Eli, breath ragged. "We fight together." And so they did. The arroyo became a kill zone. Eli, propped against the stone, fired steady, each shot precise despite the pain in his leg. Nayeli moved quick and fierce, her knife flashing when men pressed too close, the rifle cracking in her hands when she found an opening. One by one, the attackers fell. Dust choked the air. Gunpowder burned their lungs. Blood slicked the rocks. But Eli and Nayeli held, back to back, defiant against the tide. At last, silence crept back in. No more whistles, no more hoofbeats, only the rasp of their own breathing and the drip of blood into sand. Eli lowered his rifle, chest heaving. "You still think I should have left you outside that tent?" Nayeli wiped the blood from her cheek, her lips curling faintly. "If you had Inda, you'd already be dead." He laughed once, short, raw, but real. Then his head sagged back against the stone, the wound in his thigh burning hot. Nayeli knelt, tearing cloth to bind it. "Don't close your eyes," she ordered. "We're not finished yet." He managed a weak smile. Bossy for someone who barged into my tent. Her hands stilled for a moment, then tightened the knot. "You let me in." The words, quiet but steady, struck deeper than the bullet had. Above them, the canyon lay strewn with bodies and broken stone, but somewhere beyond the ridge, more men would be coming. The fight was far from over. The desert gave them no mercy. By the time the moon sank and the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Eli's leg burned like fire, every step of his horse a jolt of pain. His shirt was stiff with dried blood, his face pale, yet he pressed forward, refusing to collapse in front of Nayeli. They rode until the arroyo widened into open plains, dotted with mesquite and sage. In the distance, a cluster of abandoned adobe ruins sat half-buried in the sand, walls crumbling, roofs long gone. It wasn't safe, but it was shelter. "Here," Eli muttered, pulling his horse to a stop. He nearly fell from the saddle, but Nayeli was there, slipping under his arm to steady him. "You're bleeding again," she said, voice tight with worry. "I've had worse," he lied. She half-dragged, half-guided him into one of the ruined rooms, settling him against a wall where the shade cut the sun's bite. Then she tore strips from what remained of her shawl, pressing them to his thigh. He hissed at the sting, but didn't push her away. For a moment, the silence was filled only by her hands working, her breath steady despite the fatigue etched in her features. Finally, Eli broke it. "You keep patching me up, but you don't patch the truth." "That book, what's in it, Nayeli?" "All of it." Her hands stilled, then resumed. "Names, dates, trades made in secret. They supply whiskey and rifles to break villages, to turn brother against brother. Even chiefs are on those pages. Men who took gold to betray their people." Eli's eyes narrowed. "And your father?" Her jaw tightened. "He wrote it. He was meant to deliver it to the judge in Santa Fe. But before he could, they killed him. I found his body with the ledger still under his hand." Eli's chest sank with the weight of her words. He had lost men before, friends, family, but the way she said it carried a grief sharper than any blade. "So now it's yours to finish," she nodded. "If it dies with me, his death means nothing." For a long moment, Eli studied her. She was younger than she looked, her face hardened by loss but still carrying traces of the girl she must have been before the desert turned her into steel. He leaned back, closing his eyes briefly against the pain. "You know what happens if we get that ledger into the wrong hands. If the judge is bought, if word leaks, we'll die before we step foot back on the trail." Nayeli's voice was calm, but unyielding. "Then we choose our hands wisely. That's all we can do." Eli opened his eyes, meeting hers. "And you trust me with it? A cowboy who nearly sent you away when you asked for shelter?" Her lips curved faintly, though it wasn't a smile. "You didn't send me away. That's enough." He let out a rough laugh, shaking his head. "You've got a strange measure of trust. You carry guilt like a shield," she said softly, "but you still fight. Men who fight with nothing to gain are rare." Eli fell silent, her words cutting deeper than he wanted to admit. Outside, the wind stirred, carrying the faint sound of hoofbeats. Nayeli froze, eyes sharp, hand going to her knife. Eli's hand tightened on his rifle, but the sound faded again, distant. For now, they were alone. She sat back against the wall, drawing the ledger from beneath her shawl. She opened it carefully, as if the cracked leather might crumble in her hands. The pages were dense with names, figures, coded notes her father had kept. She traced one with her fingertip. "This," she whispered, "is why they hunt me. Because if one name reaches light, others will follow, and the whole rotten tree falls." Eli leaned forward, his voice low. "And you're ready to die for it." She looked at him, eyes steady, no hesitation. "Yes." The word sank like a stone in Eli's chest. He had spent years running from death, dodging it at every turn. But here sat a woman who welcomed it if it meant carrying out her father's will. Something about that terrified him more than the bullets. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Then I guess I'm in it too, like it or not. She closed the book, binding it again with the cord. You already were, Eli. The moment you opened that flap, the weight of her words pressed heavy, but strangely, for the first time in years, Eli didn't feel like he was running. He felt like he was standing, battered, bleeding, but standing. The ruins creaked in the wind, dust swirling through cracks in the walls. Nayeli leaned back, her eyes finally closing, exhaustion dragging her under. Eli sat watch, rifle across his lap, staring at the horizon. He knew more riders would come. The question wasn't if but when, and this time he couldn't decide if he was more afraid of losing his life or of failing hers. The ruins held their breath. For a few stolen hours, Eli and Nayeli believed they had carved a small silence out of the desert's chaos. The walls shielded them from the wind, the ledger lay bound beneath her shawl, and the fire in her eyes burned steady enough to ward off the dark. But safety never lingered long on the frontier. The sound came first, distant hoofbeats, steady, deliberate. Not the wild pounding of men chasing, but the slow rhythm of hunters who already knew where their prey was hiding. Eli stiffened, his rifle already in his hands. Nayeli opened her eyes at once, the knife sliding from her belt. They've found us, she whispered. Eli cursed under his breath, peering through the cracks in the wall. The dawn light painted the horizon in pale gold, silhouettes emerging one by one. 6 riders, their shapes stark against the sky, and at their head rode a man different from the rest. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a red bandana around his neck and a rifle cradled easy in his arms. The way he carried himself told Eli everything. This wasn't a common raider. This was the kind of man others followed without question. The riders reined in just short of the ruins, their leader calling out, his voice calm but cutting. "Cowboy! Apache girl! You think broken walls will keep you safe? Hand over the book and maybe we'll let you walk." Nayeli's grip on the ledger tightened. "He knows what we carry." Eli set his jaw. They always did. The leader raised a hand. 2 of his men dismounted, spreading wide, rifles ready. The others fanned out, circling the ruins. The noose was tightening. Eli pulled Nayeli down behind the crumbled wall. "We hold them as long as we can. Then we break out through the back." She shook her head, eyes fierce. "We can't keep running forever. Sooner or later, they'll corner us again. Then we make sure it's later," he snapped, sliding rounds into the chamber. The first shots cracked, bullets slamming into adobe, showering them with dust. Eli fired back, his shot striking one rider's horse and sending both beast and man tumbling. Nayeli sprang up beside him, hurling a rock with lethal precision that smashed into another attacker's temple. He crumpled, blood pooling fast. The leader's voice rang again, colder now. "So be it. Burn them out." Eli's eyes widened as the riders lit torches, flames licking high in the dawn air. They hurled them onto the thatched remnants of the roof, sparks catching dry straw. Smoke filled the ruin, choking, blinding. "Move!" Eli barked, dragging Nayeli toward the rear wall. He kicked at the crumbling adobe until it gave, bricks tumbling down in a cloud of dust. Sunlight spilled through the gap. Nayeli slipped out first, clutching the ledger tight. Eli followed, blood soaking through the bandage on his leg. Every step agony, but he didn't stop. Not now. They burst into the open, sprinting toward the horses tied in the shadows. Shouts erupted behind them, gunfire tearing through the smoke. A bullet whipped past Eli's head. Another punched into the dirt at Nayeli's feet. She vaulted into her saddle, turning her horse sharply. Eli hauled himself onto his mount, teeth gritted against the pain. They spurred the animals hard, hooves thundering across the desert floor. The riders pursued at once, their leader urging them on with ruthless precision. Gunshots cracked, dust exploding around Eli and Nayeli as they fled. "Keep low!" Eli shouted, ducking against the horse's neck. They raced across the plains, weaving through scrub and stone. The riders closed the distance, relentless, their shouts echoing. The chase stretched brutal, every heartbeat another reminder that the desert gave no room for mistakes. Ahead, jagged cliffs loomed, a narrow pass cutting through. Eli pointed. "There, ride!" They plunged into the pass. the walls rising high, funneling them forward. Behind, the riders followed, their hoofbeats crashing like thunder in the confined space. Nayeli glanced back, her voice raw. "They're too close!" Eli's eyes scanned the cliffs. Loose rock, unstable from storms. He raised his rifle, steadying as best he could with his leg screaming. He fired. The shot cracked the cliffside, sending a shower of boulders tumbling. The pass filled with chaos, dust, stone, and screaming horses. 2 riders were crushed outright, another thrown hard into the rocks. The rest reined back in panic, their path blocked by rubble. Eli and Nayeli burst free of the pass, galloping hard until the land opened wide again. Only then did Eli slow, his chest heaving, his leg near giving. Nayeli pulled alongside him, her face streaked with dust and sweat, but her eyes still burning. "You keep buying us another day," she said softly. "But how many more days until the book is delivered?" Eli met her gaze, weary but unyielding. "As many as it takes." Behind them, smoke rose from the ruins, and the riders' distant cries echoed, a promise that the hunt wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The desert sun bore down mercilessly, each hour turning the land into a furnace. Eli slumped in his saddle, his thigh wound searing with every step. Sweat streaked his face, and his hat did little to shield him from the punishing light. Beside him, Nayeli rode steady, her shawl pulled tight, the ledger hidden beneath. For hours they rode in silence, the sound of their horses' hooves blending with the wind. Each mile felt stolen, borrowed from the men surely still hunting them. By midday the heat became unbearable. Eli's vision blurred, the horizon shimmering like water. His grip on the reins slipped once, twice, until Nayeli reached across and steadied him. "You'll fall," she warned, her voice taut with concern. "I'm fine," he muttered, though his face was pale. She pulled them to a stop, sliding down from her horse. "We can't outrun death if you ride straight into it. We need shade." Eli wanted to protest, but his body betrayed him. He nodded once, acting reluctantly, and let her lead them toward a rocky bluff that offered slivers of shadow. They dismounted, leading the horses into the cool, narrow canyon. There, in the stillness, they found signs of life, smoke faintly curling from a fire pit, tracks fresh in the sand. Eli's hand went to his rifle at once. "Someone's here," he muttered. Before Nayeli could answer, a voice called out from deeper in the canyon. "Easy there, friend." Rifle stays pointed down, and maybe we talk instead of bleed. From the shadows stepped a man in his 40s, lean, weathered by sun and dust. His coat was worn but neat, his revolver holstered low on his hip. His eyes, sharp and steady, studied them with the weight of a man who had seen much and trusted little. "Name's Calder," he said evenly. "I saw your trail. Figured you weren't out here for leisure." Eli kept the rifle half raised, suspicion etched across his face. "And what makes you think we're in the mood for talking?" Calder's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Because if I wanted you dead, I'd have taken the shot 10 minutes ago when you were swaying in the saddle like a drunk." Nayeli stepped forward, her gaze steady. "You followed us." "I scout these lands," Calder replied. "And lately, these lands crawl with hired guns looking for a girl and a book. Imagine my surprise when the trail led straight to you." His eyes flicked to the bundle under her shawl. "I won't ask to see it. Don't need to. Word travels." Eli stiffened. "Then you know why they're after us." Calder nodded. "Ledger full of names. Filth that's rotted the land from the inside. Men want it buried. Maybe some want it read." Nayeli's jaw tightened. "And you? Which are you?" The silence stretched before Calder finally answered. "I was a deputy once. Before I saw too much of the law bought with the very gold that book records, I walked away. Been living out here since war, keeping my head down." Eli snorted. "Then why bother with us?" Calder's eyes hardened. "Because maybe I'm tired of keeping my head down." For a moment, no one moved. The canyon wind stirred, carrying with it the faint scent of mesquite smoke. Nayeli looked at Eli, her eyes searching. "He could help us," she whispered. Eli's voice was sharp. "Or he could turn us in for coin." Calder raised his hands slightly. "I don't care for their gold, but I do care about putting a bullet in the kind of men you're running from. You let me ride with you, and I'll see you as far as Santa Fe. You don't, and you'll likely bleed out in the sand before you get halfway." Eli studied him, suspicion gnawing. Trust was a currency rarer than water out here, and he had been burned too many times. But his leg throbbed, his body weakened, and deep down, he knew they wouldn't last another week alone. Nayeli broke the silence first. "We can't make it without help." Eli looked at her. then at Calder. His rifle lowered, though not completely. "One wrong move, and I drop you where you stand." Calder smirked faintly. Fair enough. That night, they camped together in the canyon, the fire low, their horses tethered close. Eli kept watch with his rifle across his lap, eyes never straying far from Calder, but the man made no move, only sat cleaning his revolver, his posture relaxed but ready. Nayeli finally spoke, her voice quiet. "Do you really think we can trust him?" Eli didn't look away from Calder. "I don't trust anyone. But sometimes you ride with the devil you know less than the one chasing you." The fire cracked softly, sparks drifting upward. For the first time in days, Eli allowed himself to exhale, though unease still gripped him. Calder's presence might mean survival, or it might mean betrayal waiting in the dark. The next morning, the desert air was cool, carrying the faint scent of sage. Eli's wound still burned, but Calder's steady hand had redressed it with surprising skill. For the first time since the ambush at the arroyo, Eli could ride without feeling like each step of his horse might topple him. They rode in a cautious formation, Calder ahead, scanning the horizon with the trained eye of a man who knew every trick of the desert. Nayeli in the middle, the ledger hidden beneath her shawl. Eli at the rear, rifle balanced across his saddle horn. Trust was still thin, but necessity had forced them into rhythm. By noon, they cut across a dry riverbed, the cracked earth echoing under the horses' hooves. Calder raised a hand suddenly, signaling them to halt. He slid off his horse, crouching low to the ground. "Tracks," he muttered. 6, maybe 7 riders. Heavy prints, recent. They're shadowing us. Nayeli's eyes darkened. "How far?" Calder pointed east. "Half a day, maybe less. They're cutting wide, trying to box us in." Eli's grip tightened on his reins. "So what do we do?" Calder straightened, his face calm. "We set the trap before they do." He led them to a narrow gorge where the cliffs pinched tight, forming a choke point. Rocks littered the ground, perfect for cover. Calder's voice was brisk, almost commanding. "We'll wait here. When they ride through, we take the high ground. Hit them before they know we're here." Eli eyed him warily. "And you're certain they'll come this way?" Calder smirked faintly. "Certain enough to bet my skin. You in, Cowboy?" Eli grunted. "Not like we have a choice." They set up quickly, climbing the jagged rocks until they had a clear vantage over the gorge. The wait was tense, the silence broken only by the whistle of the wind. Nayeli crouched low beside Eli, her knife clutched tight, while Calder lay prone with his rifle, eyes sharp on the horizon. Then the riders appeared. One by one, they filed into the gorge, their shadows long in the late afternoon sun. Eli counted 6. The leader rode tall, scanning the cliffs, but not high enough. They were walking into the trap. Calder gave a sharp nod. "Now!" Gunfire exploded. Eli's rifle cracked, dropping the first man clean from his saddle. Calder fired with lethal precision, cutting another before he could raise his weapon. The canyon filled with chaos, horses rearing, men shouting, bullets whining off stone. Nayeli moved with fearless speed, hurling rocks down on the riders to scatter them. Eli covered her, reloading fast, each shot echoing through the gorge. Calder didn't waste a bullet. Every pull of his trigger found its mark. Within minutes, the ambush was over. 3 bodies sprawled lifeless in the dust. 2 more wounded groaned, and one rider fled, spurring his horse hard out of the canyon. Eli stood, chest heaving, lowering his rifle. "Not bad for a day's work." Calder rose more slowly, brushing dust from his coat. "I told you, I've been hunting men like this for years." Nayeli's eyes softened, though suspicion still lingered. "You saved us." Calder met her gaze, his voice steady. "No, we saved each other." But then Eli noticed something. As Calder bent to strip the weapons from the fallen, his hand lingered too long on one of the dead men's satchels. He pulled free a packet of coins, slipping it into his coat before turning back. It was quick, almost careless, but Eli saw it. Later, as the 3 of them camped in the shelter of a mesquite grove, Eli sat apart, cleaning his rifle, his eyes never leaving Calder. The man moved confidently, starting a fire, checking the perimeter, speaking calmly to Nayeli as though trying to earn her trust. Eli's voice cut through the quiet, low but sharp. "You didn't mention helping yourself to the dead." Calder looked up, unbothered. "They won't be needing gold where they're headed. Better we use it than leave it for scavengers." Eli's eyes narrowed. "Or better you keep it for yourself." Calder smirked faintly. "What difference does it make? Gold's gold. Doesn't change what we're doing here." But Eli felt the knot tighten in his gut. He had seen too many men start with pocketing coins and end with selling out their own. Trust was a fragile thing, and Calder had just cracked it. Nayeli sensed the tension, her eyes darting between them. Enough. We need each other, whether we like it or not. Eli didn't answer. He only stared into the fire, the flames reflected in his hard eyes. Calder had proved himself in battle, but in the quiet after, Eli knew the fight for survival wasn't just against the men chasing them. It might also be against the man sitting across the fire. The fire burned low, its glow licking at the shadows of the mesquite grove. Eli sat rigid, rifle balanced across his knees, his eyes never leaving Calder. The man slept light, one hand always resting near his revolver, but Eli noticed the faint bulge in his coat where the stolen coins lay. Nayeli dozed against her saddle, the ledger hidden beneath her shawl. Her breathing was steady, but her grip on the book never loosened, even in sleep. Eli's thoughts gnawed at him. Calder had fought like a brother in the canyon, but greed had a way of rotting men from the inside. He'd seen it before. Good men turned bad for less than what they now carried. The night passed heavy. At dawn, they rode again, pushing east across the plains. The sun rose hot, and with it, tension thickened. Calder kept his distance, scouting ahead, while Eli lagged behind, eyes sharp, measuring every move. By midday, they reached the edge of a dry basin. The land stretched flat for miles, no cover save for scrub and jagged stones. Calder reined in, scanning the horizon. Something's off, he muttered. Eli's hand tightened on his reins. Define off. Tracks, Calder said, pointing at faint lines cut into the dust. Wagon wheels, fresh, too heavy for traders, too straight for drifters. Nayeli's voice was quiet, tight. Then who? Eli's stomach turned cold. Bounty men, and if they've got a wagon, they're carrying something worse than rifles. As if on cue, the ground seemed to tremble. A cloud of dust rose on the far side of the basin. Figures appeared, riders flanking a covered wagon, guns bristling from its sides. At least 10 men, maybe more. Ambush! Eli growled. They knew we'd cross here! Calder cursed, spinning his horse. Back into the rocks, move! They wheeled hard, spurring their mounts toward the jagged outcrops. Bullets cracked through the air, dust spraying at their heels. Nayeli clutched the reins tight, the ledger pressed against her. Eli twisted in the saddle, firing back, dropping one rider but drawing more fire in return. They reached the rocks, dismounting fast, dragging the horses into cover. Gunfire thundered as the bounty men spread wide, circling them in the basin. We're pinned, Eli muttered, his shoulder brushing Nayeli's as he checked his rifle. Calder crouched low, loading rounds with quick, practiced hands. They've got numbers and cover. Only way out is through. Eli's jaw clenched. That wagon, they'll use it to flush us out. Nayeli looked at them both, her face pale but unshaken. Then we stopped the wagon. The bounty men advanced, rifles cracking, bullets sparking off the rocks. The wagon creaked forward, shields of iron strapped to its sides. From behind them, men fired with deadly precision. Calder fired back, his shots fast and clean. He dropped 2, forcing the rest to duck. I'll draw them, he shouted. You circle left, hit the wagon from behind. Eli narrowed his eyes. Why you? Calder flashed a grim smile. Because I'm the only one fast enough to make them miss. Before Eli could argue, Calder broke cover, sprinting low across the basin. Gunfire erupted, dirt spraying around him. He dove behind a boulder, firing relentlessly, his movements unpredictable and sharp. Eli cursed, knowing they had no choice. He grabbed Nayeli's arm. Stay close. They circled left, using the rocks as cover, creeping closer to the wagon. The gunfire was deafening, men shouting, horses screaming. Eli's thigh burned with every step, but he pressed on. At last, they reached the wagon's rear. Eli pulled a stick of dynamite from a fallen satchel, left behind by one of the dead. His hands shook as he lit the fuse. Back, he shouted, hurling it under the wagon. The blast ripped the air apart. The wagon erupted in fire and splinters, horses bolting in terror. Men screamed, some crushed under falling debris. The line broke, confusion spreading like wildfire. Eli and Nayeli used the chaos, firing into the disoriented bounty men. Calder emerged from cover, his rifle spitting fire, cutting down the last of those who still stood. When silence fell, smoke and ash hung heavy. The basin floor was littered with bodies, the wagon a burning ruin. Eli staggered against a rock, chest heaving, his ears ringing from the blast. Nayeli clutched his arm, her face streaked with dust and blood. Calder approached slowly, lowering his rifle. His face was unreadable in the smoke. "You see now why I said you needed me." Eli met his gaze, suspicion still simmering. "Or why we can't live without watching you." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other, the silence heavy with distrust. Nayeli broke it, her voice steady despite exhaustion. "Enough. We're alive. That's all that matters tonight." But as they gathered the horses and prepared to ride again, Eli caught the faintest glint in Calder's eye as he glanced at the ledger under Nayeli's shawl. It was quick, almost hidden, but Eli saw it. And in that moment, he knew the fight wasn't just against the men chasing them. It was also against the shadow of betrayal growing inside their camp. The desert stretched endless under a sky heavy with storm clouds, though not a drop of rain fell. Eli rode in silence, his jaw locked tight, every muscle in his body tense. The look he'd caught in Calder's eyes after the ambush lingered like a thorn, sharp, inescapable. Nayeli rode between them, the ledger hidden but not forgotten. She felt the tension too, her gaze darting between the men. "You saved us yesterday," she said quietly, her voice meant to bridge the rift. Calder gave a faint shrug. "Did what needed doing. Didn't plan on dying in a basin." Eli snorted. "Funny. Didn't look like you were ready to die for free either." Calder's head turned, his eyes narrowing. "You got something to say, Turner. Say it straight." Eli reined in his horse, forcing them to stop. He turned in the saddle, rifle across his lap, his voice sharp. "I saw how you looked at that ledger, like it was worth more than our lives combined. Tell me now, Calder. Are you with us, or waiting to sell us when the price is right?" The silence was heavy. Nayeli's breath caught, her fingers tightening around the reins. Calder dismounted slowly, boots hitting the dirt with a dull thud. His hand rested near his revolver, though he didn't draw. "I've lived long enough to know every man's got a price, but I also know some things can't be bought. That ledger," he pointed at Nayeli's shawl, "it's fire. Touch it wrong, it burns everything. I've seen you bleed for it. I've seen her bleed for it. I'm still here, ain't I?" Eli slid off his horse, his limp heavy from his wounded thigh. He stood across from Calder, rifle loose but ready. "Still here don't mean loyal." The two men stared, the desert wind whipping dust between them. Nayeli stepped down too, moving between them, her voice fierce. "Enough! If you kill each other, the ledger dies with us. Isn't that what they want?" But before either man could answer, the sound of hoofbeats shattered the standoff, dozens this time. From the north, riders crested the ridge, black silhouettes against the storm-dark sky. A whole column, at least 20 strong, banners snapping in the wind. These weren't bounty men. Their discipline, their formation told the truth. Soldiers. Nayeli's face drained of color. "They've bought the army." Eli's stomach turned cold. "Not the army. Mercenaries in uniform. Cheaper than law. Harder than outlaws." The riders descended fast, dust billowing like smoke behind them. Calder cursed, snatching his rifle. "No time for arguing. Either we ride together or we die alone." Eli hesitated, his suspicion still sharp, but the thunder of hooves left no choice. He mounted quick, pulling Nayeli up beside him. Calder leapt to his own horse, spurring it hard. They raced across the flats, bullets whistling past, dirt exploding in sharp bursts. The mercenaries shouted, their rifles cracking in rhythm. Eli and Calder fired back, picking shots carefully even as the distance closed. Nayeli clutched the ledger tight, her breath harsh in Eli's ear. The land ahead split into two trails, one toward the jagged hills, the other toward a dried-out riverbed. Calder pointed to the hills. "Cover, we can lose them in the rocks." Eli shook his head. "No, riverbed's softer ground, their horses will bog down." They had seconds to decide. Nayeli's voice cut through, urgent. "Choose, Eli!" Eli swore under his breath, yanking his reins toward the riverbed. Calder cursed but followed, the three plunging into the cracked basin. Dust rose around them, bullets still snapping overhead. The mercenaries followed, but as Eli had guessed, their heavier horses struggled, hooves sinking into the sand. "Keep going!" Eli shouted. The chase stretched brutal, but at last the gunfire grew fainter. The mercenaries slowed, their column breaking apart in the treacherous terrain. Eli, Nayeli, and Calder burst free onto firmer ground, their horses lathered with sweat. They didn't stop until the horizon swallowed their pursuers. Finally, they reined in, breathing hard, dust thick in their throats. Calder leaned on his saddle horn, sweat streaking his face. "You were right, Turner. Damn near killed us, Mort, but you were right." Eli wiped the grit from his eyes, his voice low. "Don't think this means I trust you." Calder's smile was faint, tired. "Trust or not, we're alive. That's enough for me." Nayeli looked at them both, her voice heavy with exhaustion but steady. "Santa Fe is still far, and if mercenaries ride now, worse will come later. We can't waste our strength fighting each other." Eli exhaled slowly, his suspicion still sharp, but the truth in her words undeniable. For now, unity was survival. Yet as they rode on, Eli couldn't shake the image of Calder's hand brushing the coins, or the hunger in his eyes when they fell on the ledger. They had escaped death again, but Eli knew the most dangerous enemy might be riding beside him. Eli, Nayeli, and Calder escaped mercenaries by a desperate gamble, but the fragile alliance strains further. Eli knows the next betrayal may come not from their pursuers, but from within. The days that followed blurred into one long, punishing ride. The horizon never changed. Dust, rock, and endless sky. Each sunrise brought new hope, each sunset new fear. By now, Eli's wound had stiffened into a constant throb, and even Nayeli's fire showed cracks. Only Calder seemed untouched, his energy sharp, his eyes always searching. But Eli noticed more than the way Calder scouted the land. He noticed how his gaze drifted to the ledger, too often and too long. Each time Nayeli adjusted her shawl to shield it, Calder's jaw tightened just enough for Eli to see. They camped near a shallow creek one night, their last water before Santa Fe. The city was only days away now, but so were the men who hunted them. Eli sat apart, sharpening his knife, his eyes on Calder across the fire. Nayeli broke the silence. "When we reach the judge, this ends." Her voice was soft but resolute. "No more running." Calder's laugh was low, bitter. "You think a judge will save you? That book is worth more than law. It's worth power, and power never frees people. It only trades hands." Eli's grip tightened on the knife. "That why you keep staring at it? Planning to trade those hands yourself?" Calder's eyes snapped to him, cold fire in them. "I've bled beside you, Turner, saved your life more than once. If I wanted it, I'd have taken it already." Nayeli's voice cut between them. "Enough, both of you. We're too close to fall apart now." The fire crackled, filling the silence, but Eli's gut twisted. Something in Calder's tone, in the hard edge of his words, told him this wasn't finished. At dawn, they broke camp, pushing hard across the flats. Santa Fe's spires were still distant, but the land grew busier. Wagons in the distance, smoke from small settlements. Civilization meant safety, but it also meant exposure. Every mile closer drew more eyes. By afternoon, the trap was sprung. Shots rang from the ridgeline, bullets sparking against stone. Horses screamed, men shouting from both sides. Riders poured down, mercenaries and bounty men alike. At least a dozen, maybe more. "Move!" Eli roared, firing back. The trio spurred their horses into the canyon ahead, gunfire chasing them. Dust rose thick, choking the air. Eli's heart hammered as bullets hissed past, one grazing his hat clean off. They rounded a bend, only to find the canyon blocked by a rockfall. No way through. "Dismount!" Calder barked. They leapt down, dragging the horses behind cover. Gunfire thundered, echoing in the canyon walls. Eli fired, dropping one rider, while Nayeli clutched the ledger close, knife in her other hand. Calder fired relentlessly, his aim deadly, but the numbers pressed hard. "We can't hold," Eli growled. Calder's eyes flicked to Nayeli, then to the ledger. Something hardened in his face. Eli saw it too late. Calder lunged, seizing Nayeli's wrist. She cried out, struggling as he yanked the ledger free. His voice was raw, almost desperate. "This is the only way. With this I buy us freedom. No more running, no more blood." Eli's fury exploded. "You bastard!" He charged, tackling Calder hard into the dirt. The ledger flew from Calder's grasp, skidding across the sand. Nayeli scrambled for it, but gunfire pinned her down. Eli and Calder grappled, fists slamming, knives flashing. Calder fought like a man cornered, brutal and unrelenting. Eli's wounded leg buckled, pain flaring, but rage drove him. "You damn her father's name for gold," Calder snarled, spitting blood. "I'd damn the whole world if it meant living." They rolled, blades flashing, each strike closer to death. Nayeli screamed, diving for the ledger as a bullet struck near her hand. She snatched it, clutching it to her chest. Calder saw fury twisting his face. He shoved Eli back, lunging for Nayeli. Eli didn't think. He fired. The shot echoed like thunder in the canyon. Calder froze, eyes wide, a bloom of red spreading across his chest. He staggered, reaching once toward the ledger, then collapsed into the dust, his breath rattling out one last curse. Silence hung, broken only by the distant hoofbeats of retreating men. The mercenaries had seen their leader fall and scattered, leaving the canyon littered with smoke and blood. Eli dropped his rifle, chest heaving, his body trembling with pain and rage. Nayeli knelt beside him, her hand gripping his shoulder. "You saved me," she whispered. He looked at Calder's still body, bitterness heavy in his throat. "I saved us, but we lost him long before the bullet." Nayeli pressed the ledger tight against her chest, her face streaked with dirt and tears. "Then we finish this. For my father, for Boone, even for Calder, if there's any piece of him left worth remembering." Eli nodded, his voice low. "Santa Fe's close. One more ride." The canyon wind swept over them, carrying away the last echoes of betrayal. Ahead, the city waited, a place where truth could finally be spoken or buried forever. Santa Fe shimmered under the midday sun, its adobe walls glowing pale gold, its streets crowded with wagons, soldiers, and townsfolk. To Eli, it looked less like salvation and more like another battlefield. The ledger weighed heavy under his coat, every step through the gates shadowed by suspicion. Nayeli rode close, her shawl drawn tight. Her eyes scanned the busy streets, alert to every uniform, every stranger who lingered too long. The city's pulse was loud, voices bargaining in the marketplace, church bells echoing, boots striking against cobblestone. Yet beneath the noise was the gnawing sense that danger had arrived ahead of them. They found the courthouse on the plaza's edge, its flag snapping in the wind. Eli reined in, studying the entrance. Armed guards stood by the doors, their eyes sharp. "This is it," he muttered. "One way or another." Nayeli's grip tightened on the ledger. "My father trusted the judge inside. If he is still the man he was, this will matter." Eli's jaw clenched. "And if he's been bought?" She met his gaze, her voice steady. "Then we fight until someone honest hears the truth." They dismounted, leading their weary horses to the hitching post. Eli's limp was worse now, pain flaring with every step, but he forced it down. Together, they climbed the courthouse steps, their shadows long in the noon light. Inside, the cool air smelled of ink and dust. Clerks shuffled papers, messengers hurried down corridors. At the far end, in a high-ceilinged chamber, Judge Alvarado sat behind a heavy desk. His hair was white, his face carved with lines of age, but his eyes were sharp as a hawk's. Nayeli stepped forward, bowing her head briefly. "My father trusted you. He died for this." She laid the ledger on the desk, untying the cord. The judge's brows rose as he flipped through the pages, scanning the names, the figures, the damning details. "Good Lord," he whispered. "If this is true, half the territory is rotten to its core." "It's true," Nayeli said, her voice trembling but strong, "and men are still dying because of it." Before the judge could answer, the chamber doors burst open. Soldiers marched in, their boots pounding. Behind them strode a man in a fine coat, his smile cold, his eyes cruelly familiar. The scarred bounty leader's brother. He tipped his hat mockingly. "Well, well, thought you could slip past us, did you?" The soldiers raised rifles. The judge rose, his voice stern. "This is a court of law. Put down your weapons." The man sneered. "Law? The law is what we pay for." He turned to the soldiers. "Take the book. Kill the rest." Chaos erupted. Eli shoved Nayeli behind the desk as rifles roared. He fired back, the recoil slamming his shoulder, dropping one soldier before another bullet splintered the judge's chair. Clerks screamed, scattering like birds. Nayeli clutched the ledger, darting low as a soldier lunged for her. She slashed with her knife, the blade biting deep into his arm. He cried out, stumbling back. The judge ducked, shouting above the din. "Get it to the records office. If it's copied, it cannot be buried again." Eli's chest burned as another shot grazed his side. He staggered but stayed on his feet, covering Nayeli as she sprinted toward the rear hall. The bounty leader roared, cutting her off, his pistol gleaming. "You think that book makes you powerful? It makes you a corpse." He raised his gun, then Eli tackled him hard, both men crashing into a row of benches. The pistol clattered away as they grappled, fists slamming, blood spraying. Nayeli fled into the records office, bursting through the doors. She threw the ledger onto the clerk's table, her voice breaking. "Copy it, now!" The clerks hesitated, terrified. She slammed her knife into the desk. "Now." Back in the chamber, Eli fought like a man possessed. The bounty leader drove him into the wall, fists brutal, but Eli's fury was stronger. He grabbed a shard of broken wood, driving it into the man's shoulder. The outlaw howled, but lunged again, his hands around Eli's throat. Nayeli returned, the ledger gone, her hands empty but her eyes blazing. She kicked the outlaw hard in the ribs, breaking his grip. Eli seized the moment, wrenching the man's own pistol and firing point blank. The shot echoed through the chamber. The outlaw fell, lifeless, blood staining the marble floor. Silence followed, broken only by the ragged sound of Eli's breath. The judge straightened, his robes torn, his face pale but resolute. "The ledger is being copied as we speak. Even if they kill us here, the truth will spread." Nayeli leaned against the desk, trembling with exhaustion. "Then my father's death was not in vain." Eli dropped the pistol, his chest heaving, his body failing but his spirit unbroken. He looked at her, and for the first time in years, he felt more than survival. He felt purpose. Outside, the bells of Santa Fe tolled, their peals carrying across the city. The fight was not over, but for the first time, it felt winnable. The bells of Santa Fe tolled long into the evening, their echoes carrying across the adobe streets like a signal of change. In the courthouse, the chaos had settled, but the scent of gunpowder and blood still lingered. Clerks hurried with ink-stained hands, copying page after page from the ledger, each stroke of the quill another nail in the coffins of the corrupt. Eli sat slumped against a pillar, his shirt torn, blood seeping through bandages hastily wrapped. His leg throbbed, his ribs screamed, but he was alive, more alive, he realized, than he had been in years. Nayeli stood near the judge's desk, her shawl hanging loose, her knife still at her hip. She was bruised, dirt-streaked, but unbroken. When she looked at Eli, there was no triumph in her eyes, only exhaustion and a steady fire that refused to dim. Judge Alvarado stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he held a fresh copy of the ledger. "It is done. The truth is preserved. Even if flames take this courthouse, it cannot be buried again." Nayeli's voice was quiet, but strong. "My father gave his life for this. Boone, too. And Calder." She faltered for the first time, her lips tightening. "Even in betrayal, he showed us what greed can do. Let his death be the last lesson." Eli's gaze fell to the floor. He had seen too many graves dug for lessons that came too late. Still, he nodded. "They'll come for you now," he warned the judge. "Every name in that book will send men with rifles to your door." The judge's eyes were clear. "Then let them come. I have lived long enough to fear death less than silence." Outside, the sky blazed with the colors of dusk. The streets were restless, rumors already spreading, whispers carrying faster than any horse. The ledger had slipped from shadow into daylight, and the world would never look quite the same. Nayeli stepped out onto the courthouse steps, the wind tugging at her hair. Eli followed, limping heavily, but refusing her offer of support. They stood together, side by side, watching as townsfolk gathered, murmuring, curious. Eli spoke low, meant only for her. "You've done it. Your father would be proud." Her eyes glistened, but she held her chin high. "We've done it. He trusted me with the ledger, but it was you who made sure I lived to deliver it." Eli gave a faint, tired smile. "Guess I've still got some use after all." For the first time in a long while, the air around him didn't feel heavy. Boone's sacrifice, Calder's downfall, Nayeli's courage, they had carried the truth into the light. What came next would be war in courtrooms and streets, but at least the silence had been broken. They left Santa Fe at dawn 2 days later, not as fugitives, but as witnesses. The ledger would stay with the judge, its copies already spreading east. Eli and Nayeli had no need to linger. Their fight was not with papers, but with the land still scarred by men's greed. On the trail out of the city, Eli paused, looking back once. The bells were ringing again, softer this time, but steady. He thought of Boone's crooked grin, of Calder's final snarl, of Nayeli's father and the fire he had carried to his last breath. Nayeli rode up beside him, her voice quiet. "Do you think it will change anything?" Eli's eyes stayed on the distant city. "Maybe not everything, but enough to make their deaths mean something." She nodded, and for the first time since they met, her hand brushed his on the reins. Not a promise, not a plea, just a quiet bond forged in fire and blood. They turned their horses west, riding into the rising sun. The desert stretched wide, merciless and beautiful, but for the first time, neither of them felt alone. Eli and Neely's story is one of sacrifice, betrayal, and courage, the kind of story that reminds us truth can survive even when everything else is lost. The ledger they carried was more than ink and names. It was a spark that lit a fire no bullet could extinguish. If this tale moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice, survival, and unexpected bonds. And when you're ready, watch our next video, another journey where courage is tested and where ordinary people do extraordinary things.